Portugal began a controversial bid to build Europe's biggest artificial lake and fulfill a decades-old dream to irrigate its historically parched and poverty-stricken south. Prime Minister Antonio Guterres officially closed the floodgates at the $1.7 billion El Cueva Dam on the Guadiana River, which is set to flood a valley and cover an area of 250 square kilometres. El Cueva project, which was first designed in 1957, has drawn resentment from many residents of the nearby Aldea da Luz, who were forced by rising waters to leave their lifelong homes in the Village of Light, as it is called in Portuguese. But the villages were rehoused, and the government has stressed the need to build thousands of kilometres of pipes over the next 20 years to irrigate up to 110,000 square kilometres in the Alentejo region. The strategic water reserve of 4.15 billion cubic would also buffer Alentejo farmers from frequent droughts and make them less dependent on scratching a living from what wheat, olives and vines they can grow in the region's arid soil. For the first time, El Cueva would allow Alentejo farmers to grow pricey fruit and horticultural produce, much of which Portugal currently has to import from Spain. Environmental groups have for years protested that flooding the valley southeast of Lisbon would strip Portugal of much of its key flora and fauna. Environmental group Quercus has said that the El Cueva reservoir would drown half of Portugal's home oak groves, would disrupt river life by making the Gardenia saltier, and threaten the habitat of the few remaining Iberian lynxes.
A 5-hour surgery at a New York hospital was the first ever in vivo gene therapy in the brain, and an ambitious experiment that may bring hope to millions of Parkinson's disease patients. The procedure was performed by Dr. Michael Caplet, a neurological surgeon at New York's Weill Cornell Medical Center. In the procedure, doctors infused 3.5 billion viral particles, each bearing a copy of a human gene. This is meant to help relieve tremors and other abnormal movements caused by the disease. Once infused, the virus is expected to begin producing a protein that at the same time produces GABA, a molecule that is released by nerve cells to inhibit or dampen activity. In Parkinson's patients, not enough of this chemical is being released into this area of the brain. What they are trying to do is put a gene in which will allow it to make its own GABA, and then to quieten itself down and try to re-establish the normal chemical balance that most patients without Parkinson's disease have in this area. The first procedure was a phase 1 clinical trial, which means that its main goal is to determine safety and not efficacy. The experiment was Dr. Caplet's dream for almost 15 years. After extensive research and experiments on animals, the US Food and Drug Administration approved the procedure for 12 people with severe symptoms of Parkinson's. But some leading experts in gene therapy and Parkinson's have criticized the surgery, saying the experiment went forward without evidence in monkeys that it could work. They also expressed concern about possible side effects from infusing a virus deep into the brain. But Dr. Caplet believed the time was right for therapy to be tested. There hasn't been any evidence of damage in roughly 10 years of using this virus in a variety of rat and monkey studies, and it has also been used safely in a childhood brain disorder for a genetic disease, so it is our hope that this is a safe vehicle. Nonetheless, it has to first be proved in human patients. As for the patient, Nathan Klein, he is in good spirits and hopeful that he'll be one of the first lucky patients to benefit from this breakthrough procedure. Klein was awake during the process, since heavy medications and anesthesia can confuse the electrical information obtained. He says the most uncomfortable part of the procedure was when Dr. Caplet drilled a hole about the size of a quarter into his skull. Although he did not feel pain, he felt a strong pressure on his head and on his teeth. Other than that, he says, the procedure could not have been easier, and he's now ready to walk out of the hospital and return to his normal life.
In an effort to reverse coral reef decline, a Malaysian diving and coral conservation group recently transplanted corals in the South China Sea. The Coral Reef Conservation Alliance teamed up with Malaysia's Marine Parks Department to transplant the corals and sink an artificial reef at Lake Tengah Island off the east coast of Terengganu State. Lake Tengah, sandwiched between the popular Perhentian and Redang Islands, is home to 4 resorts and several dive sites. Holiday makers are increasingly turning up in Lake Tengah for a laid-back beach, snorkeling and diving vacation as resorts in other islands fill up with organised tours. Coral called marine park officials to teach divers techniques in transplanting corals before they took the plunge just after Earth Day. The divers also brought along a metal leatherback turtle sculpture to be sunk and used as an artificial reef near the coral transplant site. "40 divers took part in the coral transplant, carefully cutting corals from other areas to be transplanted into areas stripped of marine life. They took several hours to complete their transplanting task and then enjoyed leisure dives around the island. Coral organiser Jamaria Jafar said the organisation had made coral transplanting a trademark effort. The divers also released fish around Lake Tengah to mark the occasion. The world's fastest, coolest and most advanced robots are participating in a cyborg rave ahead of celebrations for the birthday of Japan's most famous and fictitious robot, Astro Boy. Robots are learning their steps really fast. They showed they no longer plod along in slow, deliberate steps. Instead, they prove how they have evolved into fast-walking, fast-talking and fast-developing machines. From the tiny Monsieur Toupee that sits on a person's palm, to handyman HRP1S who can do the housework, the future is at hand. And robots are no longer the insensitive heavy metal types they were once stereotyped to be. The latest Robo V2s can feel through warm rubbery skin and coo with joy upon being stroked. Sony, with its troupe of dancing robots, leads the way in what could be called feel-good robots. Much of Japan's fascination with robots can be traced to its adoration with Atom Boy, known to most outside Japan as Astro Boy. At the beginning of the cartoon series, first illustrated by Japan's Osamu Tezuka, the small but powerful cyborg was given life by a mad scientist hoping to replace his dead son. Many Japanese hope to emulate him now and create the first real Astro Boy. Three cuddly lion cubs rescued from the wild have found a cozy and peaceful new home in an animal orphanage in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. The three pairs of innocent darting eyes belonging to energized bodies that cannot keep still and are always hungry are indeed the latest attraction at the park. They have been given names: Sarara, Serolibi, Maralal, names of towns and villages in the location they were found. They have been through a lot between their time their mother went missing or was killed to the moment they were discovered by villagers. Hunger pangs, threats from other wild animals, and not just knowing where to go or who to look up to for support. Game wardens at the park think their mother was threatened by locals and as a result did not return to claim her bundles. Other wardens think that their mother could have been killed because she was getting too close to the human settlements. Rescued by villagers in rural Samburu, 250 kilometers north of Nairobi, it is strongly feared that their mother could have been killed by irate villagers wary of wild animals that have been straying from the wilderness into homesteads, causing fear and panic amongst villagers. Villagers saw the cubs and called Kenya Wildlife Service to claim the pack, which will now never be introduced into the wild. This is often what happens to animals which have been brought to the animal orphanage. There being no clear-cut boundaries between where humans have settled and where wild animals can roam freely, the human beings naturally assert themselves by killing wild animals that cross the corridor and threaten their livestock. A victim of a lion attack, Ezekiel Olensingit, who lives in Kitengela, 30 kilometers south of the Kenyan capital, has been through a near-death experience when he fought with a lion which attacked his herd. He sustained injuries which have now healed, and he also managed to kill the lion that attacked his herd. A large number of Maasai people live in Kitengela and rely totally on their cattle for their diet of blood, meat and milk. They consider that any work other than herding cattle is beneath a man's dignity, and a man must be able to fight off predators like lions and leopards. Mainly, it is the isolated communities in Kenya that find themselves rubbing shoulders with the wild animals. This animal-human conflict, which many communities experience, has brought about wildlife laws, which say that the wildlife is protected and is to be conserved. Despite this, the humans come first and are within their rights if they are protecting their lives and property in the event of an attack. Scientists from the University of Southampton have been monitoring data sent back to them by satellite from boats taking part in a race. 8 yachts on the Volvo Ocean Adventure have had special equipment attached to the back of each vessel which relay information back. The radiometers or sensors monitor microscopic plant life in the oceans. The microscopic plants in the sea do two things. They provide the base of the food chain, the food for zooplankton, the fish. Without them, the plants would have no life in the sea. The other thing is, they absorb carbon dioxide as most plants do from our atmosphere, and that controls the climate that controls the atmosphere. In addition to the radiometers, each yacht carries temperature sensors, which are embedded at different depths in the keel and the rudder of each vessel. These provide data for a wider program being looked at by the university into the food chain and the way plankton plays its part in that. In the culture room of the university, they develop different types of it. Each colour tells its own story. The data being relayed back is analysed to build up a picture of how areas around the world differ. The information is then posted on the internet as a teaching tool for schools worldwide. In the long term, it's hoped the research will give an idea on whether man is endangering the very first level in the food chain. Preparations for South Africa's KwaZulu Natal Wildlife Game Auction, regarded as the biggest of its kind in the world, got underway with the first captures of the season. An auction is held every year to provide the country's public and private game reserves with an opportunity to buy wildlife from other game reserves that have an overabundance of certain species. An overabundance of game in a restricted area can have disastrous consequences, and the annual event provides a legal and transparent forum for the sale of species that are often endangered. Revenues derived from game sales are utilised for conservation programs. The use of helicopters in game capture operations was introduced in the 1970s. Species to be caught and auctioned include white rhino, nyala, kudu, zebra, giraffe, ostrich, blue wildebeest, warthog, blesbok and impala. Large mammals like the rhino are located by air and darted with minimal stress before being relocated using special heavy lift helicopters. Rated by the game industry as the top game auction in the world, the annual KZN Wildlife Game Auction has earned a solid reputation in the industry for providing top quality game kept and delivered under excellent conditions. A group of 9 hippo might be offered if they are successfully captured ahead of the auction. Perhaps this is another way increasingly rare animals can be protected.
The beautiful islands of Okinawa off the south of Japan's mainland are home to ancient and strong traditions and also to the longest living people on this earth. Okinawa has more centenarians than anywhere else in the world. And not only do many live to see 100, they're often also fit, healthy and strong. The reason they've been able to be so long-lived is that they have reduced their risk of the 3 major killers, heart disease, stroke and cancer, to among the lowest combined levels that you see in the world. Diet is the #1 key to their longevity. To shop the Okinawa way, you should spend a lot of time in the vegetable and fruit section of the supermarket. And next, when you're heading over to the meat section, spend most of your time in the fish area. An Okinawan is 5 times less likely to have a heart attack than an American, but it's not just food that keeps them strong. The elderly remain active. They continue to work late in life, not only out of necessity, but also as a way of keeping active. A deep sense of spirituality also keeps the mind as well as the body strong. Unfortunately, traditions are fading with the invasion of Western culture. it's unlikely young people will live as long as their grandparents. And so before this generation and their secrets of old age die out, scientists are clamouring to analyse every aspect of their unique and healthy lives.
Japanese mobile phone makers have unveiled new phones to make people sing. You can use them to take pictures, surf the internet, and watch television. And now, owners of Japanese mobile phones will also be able to enjoy karaoke whenever they want. After downloading the instrumental version of a tune from the internet, Vodafone's V601T can be folded in half to become a microphone. Plug the mobile phone into the nearest TV set and the screen will show the lyrics so you can sing along. For those who don't want such sophistication in their mobile phone, NTT Docomo unveiled its Pre-Mini handset, which weighs less than 69 grams. It doesn't come with karaoke, but boasts of iMode connectivity. As the number of facilities available on handsets increase, so do their applications. In the near future, commuters will not have to buy tickets or passes to ride on the train. A prepaid chip in their mobile phones will enable them to get on by just placing the phone over a sensor on the wicket. Hunting around for change will be a thing of the past, as mobile phones will also double as credit cards, and that can of soda will be available anytime. The world's smallest computer might one day go on record again as the teeniest medical kit. Researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science developed the computer system to identify, in a test tube, changes in the balance of molecules in the body, which can indicate the presence of certain cancers. It can also diagnose the type of cancer and react by producing a drug molecule to fight the cancer cells. The computer, which is made entirely of biological molecules, was developed by a team from the Institute's Department of Computer Sciences and Applied Mathematics and Biological Chemistry. Their results were published in the scientific journal Nature. As in previous biological computers produced in Shapiro's lab, input, output and software are all composed of DNA, the material of genes, while DNA manipulating enzymes are used as hardware. The latest version's input apparatus is designed to access concentrations of specific RNA molecules which may be overproduced or underproduced depending on the type of cancer. When cancer is detected, the computer's output unit can initiate the controlled release of a single-stranded DNA molecule that interferes with the cancer cell's activities, causing it to self-destruct. In one series of test tube experiments, the team programmed the computer to identify RNA molecules that indicate the presence of prostate cancer, and following a correct diagnosis, release the short DNA strands designed to kill cancer cells. Similarly, they were able to identify in the test tube the signs of one form of lung cancer. They explained that the demonstration was only in a test tube and not in living cells or living tissue. It will probably take decades before it can be used in real medical applications.
Disruption of train timetables because of leaves on the line sounds like a joke, but it's not, according to the managers of Britain's railways. Autumn leaves may add colour to a train journey, but this natural debris is also a very real hazard and can seriously delay travellers when trains are forced to slow down. The British are adapting an environmentally friendly approach, and it's attracting interest from rail companies throughout the world. £50 million each year is invested in Britain's railways to counter the problem. Crews work through the night, clearing leaves and other debris off the 21,000 miles of the nation rails. It's a challenge that never ends. The latest advance is laser technology. 2 prototype trains equipped with lasers are being tested before being brought into full-time operation. A laser right above the railhead does burn the substance off very easily. It is in the pre-production environment and it is being tested in the autumn season. All that has to be proven is that it will work at a useful speed. Leaves on rail lines cause an average of £10 million damage each year.
After a 17-year nap, trillions of red-eyed insects are crawling their way above ground in 14 states and the nation's capital. The cicadas are emerging across the eastern United States in a monster swarm known as Brood X or Brood 10. The 3.81 centimetre black bugs with iridescent wings buzz around but are harmless. They don't bite or sting, and they live above ground as adults for about 3 weeks, just long enough to reproduce before dying. Dr. Michael Raup, Professor of Entomology at the University of Maryland, says the whole game of the cicada is to emerge synchronously and simply overwhelm the predators that might be out. He said cicadas will be found more plentifully in areas where there are more mature trees and where the insects were plentiful in 1970 and 1987. They tend to thrive in sunlit forest edges, which often provide the warmer weather and younger trees most ideal for them to lay their young. That's because younger tree roots can sustain the 17-year feeding cycle of nymphic cicadas until they mature. There are more than a dozen broods of 17-year cicadas along with several 13-year varieties. The periodical cicadas burrow into the ground after hatching, some digging as far as 2.44 metres under. Below the earth, the nymphs slowly suck the sap from tree roots for nourishment. After 17 years, they emerge and climb trees and shrubs where they shred their crunchy skins and harden into maturity. The adults quickly die, but the eggs hatch in a few weeks. The young cicadas dig into the ground and won't emerge until 2021.
Hundreds of women who had mastectomies out of fear may have been unnecessarily afraid. The so-called prophylactic mastectomies were being performed on women who had a history of breast cancer in their families and who had cancer-linked mutations of BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. Their estimated lifetime risk of getting breast cancer had been put at 85%. Now a report says that lifetime risk estimates were exaggerated. A gene mutation may also be involved in deaths from the West Nile virus. Scientists have wondered why only 20% of people infected with the virus go on to develop symptoms and only 20% of them develop the often fatal encephalitis. The difference is a mutation in a gene that encodes enzymes involved in destroying viral material in infected cells. There is a new and controversial theory about what causes rheumatoid arthritis. That's where the body's own immune system causes painful and debilitating inflammation of the joints. The Harvard researchers presenting to the American Chemical Society meeting say it's naturally occurring carbohydrates that activate the immune cells. It's controversial because the arthritis research up to now indicated that proteins, not carbohydrates, cause autoimmune diseases. And it turns out coffee, colas and chocolate may actually be good for something besides expanding your waistline or your attention span. They all contain caffeine and a related compound called theophylline, which can block enzymes necessary for cell growth. That means they could form the basis of new drugs to treat cancer and heart disease.
A German inventor who has developed a talking toilet has sold more than 1.6 million of these devices since winning his patent. A woman's voice urges toilet users, in a firm but polite address, similar to instructions coming from a flight attendant, to lower the seat whenever it is lifted. One happy customer, Sandra Weidekamp, said there was always trouble because men often urinated standing up, especially my boyfriend. I got really angry until I heard of the WC Ghost. WC Ghost is sold for only a few euros, and according to a company that helps inventors obtain patents, Benkard is negotiating to market his product with companies all over the world. Watching swimmers is a lifeguard's primary concern, but distraction is the main reason why a drowning person can be missed. Some 885,000 people a year use this 50-metre pool at the Wickham Sports Centre just outside of London. For a month now, lifeguards here have been using the Poseidon system, a network of underwater cameras that monitor the bottom of the pool. New technology allows a computer to construct a three-dimensional model of swimmers in the pool. It's been programmed to identify suspicious events and then automatically trigger an alarm. Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Poseidon Technologies, Jerome Minier, says that while the fail-safe rate is high, it's still not 100%. The system has already saved the life of a young swimmer in France. Lifeguard Michael Wilkins says it adds another dimension to monitoring the pool.
Cool.
But the British Lifeguard Association is more cautious about the new system, which, if successful here at Wickham, could be installed in pools across the country. Managing Director of the Institute of Qualified Lifeguards, Jerome Minier, says the company is looking to broaden the system's application to athletic training or security systems, where conventional police closed-circuit televisions now operate. Anyone who happened to be walking along the banks of Venezuela's Agara River one Saturday morning in May would have been surprised to find their path blocked by hundreds of caimans and thousands of turtles. As part of a government project to protect these endangered species, 173 Orinoco caimans and over 5,000 ara turtles were set free to start a life in the wilds of the Agaro Gorrito National Park, 800 kilometers south of Caracas. The animals were born and raised in captivity at the Mansururo Ranch until they reached the size experts deemed appropriate. and were considered ready to face their natural predators. As the caimans took their first steps of freedom, Omar Hernandez, coordinator of the project organised by the Foundation for the Development of Physical, Mathematical and Natural Sciences, explained to the media and members of the military exactly what they were witnessing. They have been raising caimans in captivity since the late 80s, and in 1992, the Venezuelan Ministry of the Environment got involved, helping to finance the project which looks after the incubation of the eggs and the raising of the reptiles in specially designed tanks. Both the caimans and the turtles have a number of natural predators, as well as the dangers they face from the human race. Despite the small percentage of young that reach maturity in the wild, both species have an important part to play in the country's ecosystem, and their conservation is considered of paramount importance. The Aguaro River crosses the Aguaro Garito National Park, which is currently in the hands of 14 gamekeepers who are charged with preventing forest fires, as well as hunting and woodcutting.
Around 200 youngsters from schools around London attended the Environment Conference at City Hall, organised by the Greater London Assembly. It's the second time it's been run, and those behind it say it's a chance for young people to be involved with politics that they care about. Outside City Hall, a number of sculptures were made by children using waste originally destined for landfill. It shows how waste material can be used to make an artistic statement. Each represents an issue that young people are concerned with, from the environment to crime. Those at the conference say they've learned how they can improve their environment. Later, the children addressed members of the Assembly's Environment Committee, ensuring politicians heard their concerns.
The world's first ever internet cafe officially opened its doors in London in 1994, and what started out as a public space for women to learn about computers has grown into a global phenomenon. According to internet search engine Yahoo, there are approximately 20,000 cyber cafes around the world for people to check their email, surf the internet and chat, all while having a steaming cup of coffee. In 1994, many people were wary of using this new technology, but businesswoman Eva Pascoe had the foresight to see the benefits of making the World Wide Web accessible to everyone, as she became one of the first people to capitalize on this fast expanding revolution. With only one cappuccino maker and 3 computers, Pascoe wasn't prepared for the shock when she threw open the doors and was faced with an eager queue that was so long that it wrapped around the block. On day 2 of her business venture, she knew she had made it. Now, years later, Pascoe has sold the business, but has witnessed the fruits of her hard-earned labour from America to Africa. She now sits on the panel as a judge of Yahoo's Internet Cafe Awards. The search engine has banded together with tourist book publisher Rough Guides and travel agent STA Travel to find some of the world's best internet cafes. also the most remote, with nominations including Mount Everest. At $50 for 2 minutes, it doesn't come cheap, to the most unusual internet cafe, like an airline-themed cyber cafe in Australia, with the motto, "Our flights are so smooth, you'd think you never went anywhere." China is racing to slake the thirst of the nation's North Plain with a mammoth water project conceived 50 years ago by Mao Zedong. Standing on the banks of the Yangtze River, he noted that the south had too much water and the north too little. Diverting southern water north was the obvious solution. A series of snaking canals and pumping stations that will shunt water from the Yangtze to the parched rivers on the North Plain, the project eclipses the Three Gorges Dam in scope and price. But like the Three Gorges project, it has already provoked an outcry by critics, alarmed at the environmental havoc that moving 44 billion cubic metres of water per year up north could create. Today, pollution runs a close second to drought for causing water shortages in China. Dirty Yangtze River water has left the south hard-pressed to take care of its own needs, let alone the 200 million peasants tilling the arid north. For now, the government is applying a series of stopgap measures to water the plains around the capital city. Beijing's first rainy week of the year was the result of overcast weather and a 17-hour government-engineered cloud seeding project. And in spite of a rapidly falling water table, city officials anxious to present a green Olympics to the world are tapping underground water resources. With little relief in sight, the nation doesn't seem set to put the brakes on the massive project, which will take nearly 50 years to wrap up. The project's eastern arm, a string of pumping stations that will increase the volume of water already flowing north through a network of old canals, is already close to being completed. Today, China is struggling with a per capita water availability only 1/4 of the global average.
US researchers say they've created an air filter system that is capable of destroying the deadly anthrax bacteria and a host of other potentially lethal viruses, including smallpox. This air purifying system that can kill airborne biological agents in ventilation systems was developed by scientists at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland. Investigator Dr. Richard Potemba created the device made from an inexpensive standard commercial filter. Then he added the purifying system that is comprised of oxygen and water. The concoction creates free radicals to help kill the pathogens, which then decompose before being pumped back into the air. The hybrid combines a traditional high-efficiency particulate air filter, HEPA, with a new technology known to neutralise airborne pathogens with the help from some ultraviolet light. To test the device, scientists piped in molecules that imitate viruses, bacteria and spores. The artificial contaminants were dramatically reduced to an almost undetectable level. In addition to killing anthrax spores, Potemba says the filter system could also help hospitals prevent the spread of infectious agents.
Mosquitoes are becoming more immune to pesticides and drugs. Therefore, a new method has to be found in the fight against malaria. The International Atomic Energy Agency is trying to use nuclear technology to help them against the tiny insect. The process is simple. Mosquitoes are bred in special centres, and the males are exposed to a short burst of radiation, rendering them sterile. The World Health Organization estimates 300 to 500 million people worldwide are affected by malaria. What is being done in the laboratory is reviving an approach used in the 1970s called the sterilized insect technique. This technique requires that a very large number of sterilized male insects are released. The females only mate once in their lifetime, so when they mate with the sterilised male, there are no offspring from that female ever. The whole concept is that the population would start to decrease and eventually lead to the eradication of the insect and therefore less malaria. Knowles also explained that the problem researchers have to solve is at what stage to irradiate the male mosquito and for how long. The male has to be strong enough to compete with the wild ones. One other problem is that when millions of these insects are being bred, the males have to be separated from the females. No small task. Recently, the IAEA helped Zanzibar to rid itself of the tsetse fly by using a combination of conventional pesticides and nuclear technology. But with the mosquito, nothing is certain yet. "75 entrants came up with designs for the Creative Crime Busting competition. Each was set the task of coming up with realistic and novel ways to fight crime in their local communities. They included ideas to help reduce mobile phone theft, to ways to prevent house burglaries. Those behind the competition believe designers have a lot to offer. British Design Council chiefs say the standard set was extremely high. Second prize in the competition went to a young product design student. Her anti-stalking kit could prove an important contributor in stopping such activity. The eventual winner came up with an inexpensive curtain system for use in Asia, which would secure properties from burglary. The Creative Crime Busting exhibition shows how young designers have an important role to play in creating the next generation of crime-resistant products.
They are the thin white lines standing guard against a mosquito invasion, the sentinel chickens of Arlington, Virginia. Like canaries in coal mines, the chickens would signal the West Nile invasion by getting infected. After an exceptionally warm winter and spring, the West Nile virus appeared earlier and spread wider than previous years. Scientists put out traps and tested mosquitoes all over the country. They spent hours in community meetings telling people how to get rid of the mosquito breeding areas on their own properties. And they spread larvicide in some 10,000 catch basins of the country's storm drainage systems. There is a lot scientists don't know about the virus and its dangers. They haven't had much time for real research since the virus first showed up in New York in 1999. How did it spread so rapidly across the United States? Why are elderly people so much more susceptible than young people? Why does West Nile trigger fatal encephalitis in some and not others? These questions remain unanswered, but one thing is clear: West Nile is here to stay in the United States. And now, while the disease is still in its early stages in the US, it is the time for the government to invest heavily in West Nile research.
Since September 11, many blue-chip companies have cut down on air travel for fear of terrorist attacks. There's also the problem of costs and those long delays at airports. British suppliers of video conferencing equipment such as Telerus, owned by Martin Lewis, a former newsreader, have reported record demand, with sales set to go up some 500%. Telerus have overcome many of the technological problems by sending the data on private, secure networks. Colleagues can chat to each other without fear of interruption.
Well, it'd be nice to have a nice demo room for us over there.
Well, I said, oh, I'm going to have to go and have a look at it. 'Cause I want to
Big
invest.
business has also seen the potential of video conferencing, with companies like Teleris investing in new systems set to make a big comeback.
On this continent, the seeds of a new nation, conceived in liberty.
The blinds may be coming down on executive travel post-September 11, but for companies like Teleris Video Conferencing, it's a truly 24-hour, round-the-clock money-making operation.